Hey everybody, it's Mike Young, lifestyle nutritionist with aPlantBasedDiet.org, back with another chapter. I got my notes for this one. It is chapter 37, which is about indoor-outdoor air quality and the importance on longevity, health, wellness, these types of things. And I know we've all heard of different things in the past, and I mean, you don't want to ever shut the garage door with your car operating, although we may be out of the era where that was an issue, because of course any internal combustion engine produces carbon monoxide along with other dangerous colorless and odorless gases, many of which do have odors but will still kill you. And we don't want you to do that, so you have to operate that outdoors, which is kind of weird that we've always had vehicles that were in garages and this kind of thing. But anyway, electric vehicles solve that problem. But something else is sick building syndrome. You've heard of that. So this chapter, I'm going to go through the list here. It's going to cover air quality indoors, outdoors. We're going to go over exhaust exposure, sick people, just breathing, or just anybody, especially now with COVID-19. I'm recording this. I'm 52 years young, 2022. We've been through this COVID pandemic now. It happened about 2 years ago when the first thing actually kicked off. And just being around people breathing outside is something that I've thought about recently. And of course, exposure to mold. So let me put this down. Let's get into all this. First of all, indoors. Most people are indoors all the time, whether it's in your house or in somebody else's office building or commercial building or in your car. These are all like indoor environments. So I'd say also what we've learned from this is a couple of things. There's a couple of principles that you need to remember about indoor air environments. Number one is, even if you live in an area where there's a lot of pollutants, you need to have fresh air coming in on a regular basis, but you need to filter that air. You need to get all the bad stuff out of it. This is true not only in your car, okay, because a lot of people spend a lot of time in their cars, and I do, but also in your house. Because if you seal up your house, because your house doesn't move, you can seal your house up if you do a really good job, and if it's newer construction, you can seal that thing up really tight. I'm a real estate agent too, so I know about building science, and I've done a lot of things with buildings myself in terms of sealing them up, and you can seal them up too much. And if you do, you need to bring in a constant source of air, and you need to do it in an efficient manner. But the bottom line is, you want to keep air circulating. You want to keep air moving, whether it's in your car, in an office building, in your house. That's a ventilation rate. You want to have a certain amount of ventilation. You want to be exchanging air with the outside. You also want to be conditioning that space, because I'm not going to talk about buildings where you're not using HVAC, because there are places you can live where you don't need HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and you can just have a fan on the ceiling spinning around. There are places, but most people don't live in those places. And even if they did, some people wouldn't even want to live in a building like that. They still want the modern conveniences. So this is another thing where the modern conveniences, and we're living lives like kings and queens, and we're having diseases of affluence. This could be another one. If the air quality is not good, and this isn't even food related, none of this is food related for this chapter or anything you're eating, although actually it is. You're consuming the air, okay? You're consuming it constantly in your body. So that air in your house has to be of good quality. And so I would say the biggest thing is if you're conditioning your space, like if it's wide open and you got windows open all the time, fans going, we don't need to talk about that so much. You have a lot fewer problems. Well, you could have mold problems actually, depending on where you are, because that's probably a climate where you probably should have some kind of climate control and you just don't have it. That's a whole other subject. But in areas that most people are living in, they have climate control. They're not having the windows open much, if at all, not in modern society where people are having these issues that we're talking about here in this V-book. And if you do live somewhere else where you don't need it, let me know. Let me know where that is in the comments down below. Tell me what, because actually my wife and I are building a house in Southeast Ecuador at an elevation of about 3,000 feet above sea level. And it's pretty mild there. We're not getting climate control at all in that house, but that's an unusual place where you can do that. So if your house has climate control, what you need to do is a couple things. This kind of gets into building science. This is going to ensure your air quality indoors. Number one is you want a really good or the best quality filtering system you can on your air handler. Because in most cases, unless you have radiant baseboard heat, well, you're still gonna have an air conditioner. And you have window units, and most people don't have those still have a filter on them. So you wanna get a good filter on those. But most people have a central system. They have a central fan, a central thermostat, and a central air handler that forces the air through all your ductwork. And it's a perfect opportunity to stick a filter on that. It probably already has a filter, if not more than one. You want to get the highest quality you can, which usually means not like, okay, I get my 1/2-inch thick filter and I spend $20 on it or $30. Those usually are so, they're more like a sheet of paper than they are a mesh. And they actually lower the airflow in your unit, which causes all kinds of other issues. You need to buy a whole new assembly that has a much thicker unit, like this thick, okay? You can find these online and private message me or something, send me an email. You can, contact information is on the description of this channel on YouTube, but I can talk to you more about that privately. Depending on what system you have, there's so many different systems and what's available on the market at that point in time. But you really want to get a high MERV value, MERV. I'd say at least a MERV 10, if not greater. And you're going to need to step up to a much thicker, filter, which you need to buy a new assembly to hold that filter in. You need to install that. It's not that big of a deal, actually, believe it or not. The other thing is, if you got one of these systems that has air flowing through it and it's a heating and a cooling, most likely it's got a coil on the inside of it in that dark ductwork where you can't see it. One of the coils, if you got an air conditioner, is outside, and you see the fan on there, and you hear the thing kick on every so often in the warm months, and you can see it. It's out there. So a lot of times the sun will shine on it, and it kind of disinfects itself. But the stuff on the inside does not disinfect itself. So there's a good chance, depending upon how sensitive you are to mold, that you are going to need to put just an ultraviolet light that shines on that coil. Because as long as there's an ultraviolet light, they make them specifically for this purpose, for HVAC systems, it will kill all the mold spores. And if you don't do it, if you don't have one of these, what's likely going to happen is, and this is true with your car too, I think they probably need to put these in car systems as well at some point. Unless you have a super good filtering system, you're going to be breeding mold on these coils. It's dark and it's wet. These coils sweat. That's why you see water come out from your air conditioning units. And a lot of that's mold spores. It's just going to, the fan of the ductwork just makes it so it easily distributes it to your whole house. It's bad. That'll affect your air quality. You may be sick. You may not. It's like, this is sick building syndrome. Like, I don't know what's going on. But if you put all this together that I just told you, I tried to say it as quickly and concisely as I can. You can see why people may get sick inside of any building, whether it's your house, whether it's your office building, commercial building, and whether it could be your car too. If you roll the windows, they're always up. Although you usually are opening the door, it doesn't get quite the same type of closed in factor as you do with an actual physical non-movable building. So that's probably one of the reasons why they don't have these ultraviolet lights on coils in cars, although you can probably get them. And even so, you don't spend much time in the car, or you can just roll the windows down. But I spend a lot of time in the car, and I actually have a Tesla Model X, and all the new Model X's have this feature. Even the Model S and the Model Y, I think, have them now. Model 3 doesn't, but they have this giant filter. It's super thick. It's not quite that thick as a home, maybe this thick, and it's like a surfboard. And it costs like $100 to $200 just to replace the filter, believe it or not. It's crazy. But it's HEPA. I can't remember what HEPA stands for. If you know, write in the comments. It's a high efficiency particulate something. And it takes all this crap out that's flowing through your car. The problem with cars and the air quality is when you're on the road, still at this day and age, 2022, most vehicles are internal combustion engines. So when they are operating in front of you and you're right behind them, they're emitting these exhaust gases and you are just breathing them in because it's sucking air in from your car. Even if you have it over-recirculated, you're still sucking air in from the car. It's not all that efficient unless you have a super powerful fan that's creating negative pressure, forcing it out, which actually I could do that in my car. It has that feature. Most cars or trucks or whatever don't have that feature. But this one on these Teslas has, because they know it's an issue. I'm thankful that they have it because I have already put over 200,000 miles in this car. And I have both a cabin filter on the inside, a small one, which is usually under the glove box on the passenger side of the car. And then they have this massive surfboard filter, which is under the frunk, which is your trunk in the front of an electric car, in between the windshield and the storage area is where that filter lies. It's a huge, huge filter, but it's great for human health. I'm telling you this because if you spend a lot of time in a vehicle, this is an area, because you can fix your house, like I told you. The house, the buildings, they're not that big of a deal. Just get the air moving. make sure there's no mold. Another thing about houses is if you're conditioned, keep the humidity under 60% at all times. Get a humidistat to check it if you need to, because as long as it's below 60, even if you had mold growing, it'll stop growing once a humidity drops below 60%. No big deal. Any kind of air conditioning system nowadays can handle it. It just needs to stay on long enough. That's why a humidistat should be included in your control panel, just like the thermostat, but that's a whole other story. But you can see how that's easily fixable, easily solvable. The stuff I'm telling you about, I solved all the stuff, by the way, like decades ago in my house. This is not new technology. This stuff's been around for decades, literally. Like in the 90s, I was doing this stuff to my own house. So in the car, again, it's kind of like an area that, as more people spend time in cars, as cars become self-driving, that environment that you're riding in, if you're going to be riding more and more, and I'm a digital nomad, that's another YouTube channel I have, adigitalnomad.net, check it out. I need to have this to maintain my health. Because you can think, if I'm on the road a lot, more so than other people, that means unless I have this correct filtering system in the car, I am breathing in all the exhaust gases of all the vehicles right in front of me. And I'm driving right into their exhaust. It's not like I can just avoid it or it won't really get to me. I'm driving straight into their exhaust. Not a good thing. Another source of pollution like this is small engines. I have a landscape business as well. I actually work in that business. And it's not that good to be around running engines. At least I'm outside. At least it's just me in most cases. At least I can stick my head to the side so I'm not breathing it in right out of the muffler like usually happens when you're in a car. You're just smashing into that exhaust of the vehicle or all the vehicles right in front of you. It's even worse when you're in traffic. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind when you walk past vehicles that are running in parking lots that you're breathing out instead of breathing in. Because you're breathing in, you're sucking in. You know, when you get close to an exhaust pipe, you're just sucking that exhaust in. You don't want to do that. If you can avoid it, avoid it. Same thing with people, especially in the era of COVID. If you're walking and someone's walking in front of you, don't get real close to them. Kind of stand back so the air that they're breathing out can just dissipate. And if someone crosses your path, and you're walking and you're gonna kind of cross over that path because you went in a diagonal, well, just also same thing, breathe in as you cross that airspace where that person just was, like literally half a second before you. These types of things. I mean, it may seem kind of silly to you, but again, I'm talking about living to 150. These are some things actually that I've done for years now. I haven't really thought about it because I just don't want to breathe in exhaust. I don't want to breathe in somebody's smelly breath. If you think about it, I just don't want to. So you have to just kind of keep in mind and make this a habit about your air quality. So with indoors, outdoors, no matter where you may be, I think I've touched on all the different aspects of how you could potentially be consuming air that would poison your body or mess your body up or throw it off balance. So if there's something I missed, please let me know. I'm trying to think of anything else. I think I got just about everything. I mean, of course, there's another thing, if you are living at a high altitude, usually there's less oxygen in the air. That actually comes into play with your cars. Your cars don't get as good gas mileage. You can't do as much as a human either when you're at higher altitudes. So that's an interesting thing, although I don't necessarily think the air quality is impactful for that. Another thing that you may not know about is that a lot of people think, well, if what you're saying is true, and I need the best air quality possible, that means that I would think the average person that lives out in the country, in the clean, fresh country air, mountain air, wherever they happen to be, is going to be way more healthier, right, than the person living in the downtown inner city or whatever, where there's all these cars moving around and I smell the exhaust everywhere I am, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's not true, actually, believe it or not. It's the opposite that's true. And the reason why is because air quality is important. And what you say, if you're thinking along those lines, is correct. But it's even more important to have a active lifestyle of purposeful exercise. And generally, people that live in downtown, the most super inner city downtowns, they have all these services and things all around them. They don't even need a car. In fact, those super downtowns aren't even designed for cars, even though you see more cars than ever crammed into a small spot. A lot of people don't have cars that live there. It's too expensive. You got to pay like $200 plus a month just to park your car. So they walk around everywhere. They're constantly moving. They're getting all that exercise, even though they are breathing in the air. It's not ideal because I wish they were getting the exercise and not breathing in all that polluted, poor air quality. But then the people out in the country are living the American dream. They got their big house on their big lot with their garage, and they can drive right into the garage, get out of the car, walk like 3 steps into their house. And they go, and that's the same method they do every time they go to the store, or they have everything delivered to their house or whatever. They barely move. That's the problem. And unfortunately, as important as this chapter is, and it really, really is important, you can't, just like you can't out exercise a bad diet, you can't, I'd say you're not going to gain longevity from optimizing your air quality if you don't have an active lifestyle. You've got to have an active lifestyle. Now, if you do all these things, you live out in the suburbs and you're constantly on a treadmill all day long, just getting regular exercise, you know, because actually, if you live out in the country, way out in the country, you may not have anywhere to get exercise outdoors, because you may have to walk along roads and run the risk of either walking or riding your bike and getting flattened by a vehicle. That's even more dangerous. You got to kind of weigh each of these things. But there's no perfect scenario, at least not right now. Although we are kind of moving towards a world, you know, in 2022 is when I'm recording this video. I'm 52 years young. A world where many cities, especially ones that are larger and that have bigger than average urban core areas that are congested, and you know, in the ways that you think, they're starting to either ban internal combustion engines or have announced plans to, in the future, ban them. Kind of like preparing everybody, get ready, this is going to happen. So if and when that happens, what they'll probably do is, you know, in some cases, they'll close some of the streets down. You've already seen that in some of the really close, the absolute center of downtown, they close down the streets permanently and make them walkable. I've seen this in places, okay? But another version of that is kind of this, is what I'm talking about, which is they'll say, well, no, if you have an internal combustion engine, you need to stop here, like a quarter mile outside of the downtown, and you're going to park and walk. Or if you're fully electric, you can keep driving in. That's what it's going to be. Fully electric will go on because, as you know, I know people say, well, electric's not good for the environment. You're still firing up that coal-fired power plant to put your electricity in there. Well, two things, right? Number one, there's no chance of killing you in your garage because you're not producing any harmful gases in your own house or at your own vehicle. And number two, you'll be able to go into these spaces in the super hyper cores of downtown cities where internal combustion engines will be banned, and for good reason. And actually, when that happens, if they get to that point, you'll have this area, this huge area of no emissions of internal combustion engines, and you'll be able to walk everywhere. Think about it. That is going to be awesome. Now, the only thing missing is that you won't be able to grow your own food, at least not with, probably not with real sunlight and real rainwater out there, because it's just a downtown area, everything's packed in, so you're going to be missing that dynamic. So it's going to be pretty darn close. It's going to be way better. You can still do indoor farming if it makes sense, vertical farming. Although also usually in these downtown areas, the real estate and everything is so darn expensive, it just takes the economies, just ruins the economy of doing something like that. Not everyone, but most of the larger city downtowns, too expensive, as we know. But I'm a real estate agent. Maybe they'll end up getting rid of zoning, and then maybe that'll positively impact that too. Although what I described in terms of banning internal combustion engines, that is a form of zoning. Who knows? This stuff is not going to be solved anytime soon, but just something to think about. If you have some ideas on this, please let me know in the comments. Let me know if you live in a downtown urban core like I'm talking about. If your city has plans, let us know which city that is. Write it in the comments. If you live out in the country, let us know how the average country person is out where you are. My guess is that they don't have as long of a lifespan if you're way out in the country. Although it's not totally true, because we're involved in some, you know, some communities, some intentional communities where it makes the most sense economically to do them way out in the country. These are some hyper-focused, super healthy people. So I think that that's bucking the trend, but that's new. That's very new within the last, you know, less than 10 years. So thank you so much for watching. If you got some value out of this, please like the video. Of course, share the video on your social media as well. And be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next chapter. Bye-bye.